from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Allen Orr. He's the founder of the Washington, D.C.-based Orr Immigration Law Firm, and he's the first Black president of the American Immigration Law Association. Good morning, Allen, and welcome. Dr. Kelly painted a pretty sober picture there, and you are an immigration lawyer. So first question I have for you is, how does this rhetoric and this rise in this rhetoric, how is it impacting immigration policy in this country?
I think it isn't impacting. I think it sort of drives the policy, because I think it's what drove the Trump administration and drove Trump to the White House was this threat of othering. And it also drove the United States to do things that it traditionally would not do, such as separate families, right? We generally would not be behind such a harsh term, but we did it, and nobody was in the streets marching about it. Recently, under Title 42, which was started by Stephen Miller, which is something that hasn't been used since 1944, that keeps Black and brown immigrants from coming to the country, and all other immigrants are able to fly in. No outpouring about it. The courts stand behind it. At the very same time, we say we're unable to process immigrants at the southern border, but 20,000 Ukrainians show up and we're able to process them at the southern border. So that kind of consistent treatment reinforces the analysis that we're under invasion and someone's coming to take something from you, which is the hardest part of replacement theory. The soft part of replacement theory is just that it happens naturally, right? It always happens naturally because people are going to continue to grow at whatever rate they do grow. But the replacement theory that we talked about, the very dangerous one, is that there's some person behind it instrumenting these people to come in, and that in some way, someone who is a migrant to this country, who gets in the asylum system, probably takes them 10 years to get a green card, and then 5 years after that to be able to vote, is going to naturally vote Democratic and have such power to do that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that Title 42. The Biden administration just recently tried to lift that policy, and the court said no. The court says no, and the policy, I guess, was implemented, you said, under the Trump administration, under the guise of protecting Americans from the spread of COVID, from this public health crisis. What was the reasoning that the court used in denying the Biden administration from lifting that ban?
So I think it was flawed reasoning, and it was an administrative. There's always two parts of always cases: administrative posture, did you do the right thing in the right way? And then the substance of the law. They didn't even get to the substance. They just said the Biden administration didn't follow the administration appeals procedure, the APA, which requires them to give notice that they were ending it, which isn't really true, because Title 42 was renewable in a 90-day period. So anytime it was renewed, all those states knew in 90 days that it was going to end. In addition to that, the court said that the Biden administration must go through the whole notice procedure, 60 days, comments, public rules, all that. But it never said that that was required to actually implement 42. So that's sort of just it's a weird analysis from the court of using the discretion of the executive branch. And this is something that we've seen from the last administration, where we've actually seen the different branches of government stop operating effectively that we would like to see in a democracy. So no longer is the executive branch able to sort of carry out the laws. Congress has been woefully not acting at all on immigration law for the last 20 years. They haven't passed an immigration bill. But now you see the courts step in an arena in which Congress should be taking the place in deciding what immigration law is. And the problem with that is the courts aren't elected in that same sense in which the executive branch was. So we're actually stifling Biden's policy overall with regards to immigrants by the court.
And what about governors like those in Texas who threaten every day? Again, if you're watching Fox News, you hear the governor of Texas threatening to, take it into his own hands, to take over immigration policy at the Texas border, to put immigrants on buses, to ship them to D.C. Is all that just bluster from the Texas governor, or is there really an effort on the part of that governor to intervene, to usurp the authority of the federal government with respect to immigration policies in Texas?
So it's a little bit of theater. So a couple of things about Texas specifically. One, the power grid doesn't work, and he spent a ton of money on the border instead of fixing the power grid. Secondly, he's using immigrants, living people, as things by busing them to DC. And then in DC, we're doing exactly what we expect a humane person to do with women and children, is we're helping them get to the destinations they need to be in to receive the health care they need. So that's really a blunt estimate.
So he is actually putting people who cross the border into Texas onto buses and send them to DC?
Yes, there have been over 20 buses that have been arrived in DC and been dispersed throughout the region, in which we've sort of helped them here get to the next stage.
Authority, since the immigration is under the purview of the federal government, how can he even do that?
He's voluntarily misleading these people and putting them on buses. So yes, he does have that authority. He also started his own sort of border control, which is now in court, the Lone Star Enforcement. So he has stepped way beyond the purview of what immigration needs to be. And this is where Congress really should step in and sort of settle this issue, because we can't have 50 different immigration policies for all these different states. But at the very same time, what is important about Texas is that Texas crossed the border did not cross Texas. So what we now call Texas was in fact Mexico. In addition to that, all of these cities that are screaming about the number of immigrants that are coming in every day make their main profits from those border institutions. So it's kind of a weird analysis to say, send us all of your good trade, all of your good workers, but anything else, we don't want that, right? It's a very American system to say, just give us the good. We're not going to deal with the whole part of what's involved in being at the border. But in addition to that, every day, every minute, there's a truck or some other visa classification coming across that southern border. So it is not impossible for us to allow asylum seekers to come to this country. We're just keeping a certain class out. And that's specifically what Stephen Miller wanted to do with the 1944 rule, was sort of aim at Black and brown immigrants. So it's a very exact tool. And there are also Democrats who are falling prey to this that are saying, oh my God, the United States can't handle 18,000 people a day. That is ridiculous. We've seen Poland, a state, country the size of New Mexico, accept 2 million people when they wanted to, with a public-private partnership to help people who are in need. So what we're not seeing now is this humanitarian sort of aid at the border, but we're sort of saying is they're things, they're chattel, but at the very same time, economically, we need more workers. For the last 3 quarters, our government has said, we're going to increase the number of H-2B workers, which are temporary seasonal workers, because we have jobs that can't be filled, and we know that we need immigrants. But what we're saying is we don't need those immigrants. We don't need the Black ones. We don't need the brown ones. And it's all linked to this replacement theory. And the biggest fear about replacement theory is that when we achieve that greater populace and that control, is that we're going to treat them the way that they treated us. That's the real fear.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because that is undergirding so much of this fear, is that, wow, we know how horrible we've been. So God forbid people that we've been horrible to now have the power, and then they reciprocate. But go back to your point about the need for workers and the granting of these temporary visas for workers. So who's getting those temporary visas? Are they people from coming in from the Mexican border?
The exact same. So it's people who have not been, so people who have been expelled under Title 42 are able to get these visa classifications if they're able sort of to find and be in the right classes. But yes, it's the same people from that same category of people from those same countries that get in. And so the issue that
on the low, we don't talk a lot about the fact that we're publicly talking about the need to repel them and to prevent them from coming into the country. But on the other hand, we're like sliding them that visa, like, come on, we really need you to work.
Well, unless you're at your summer retreat, or you're going skiing, or you own a hotel, or you own any of these luxury places that you're not able to get workers for. A lot of farmers, right, are in this situation. That's why you had a large number of people who are undocumented working at chicken plants, because Americans were no longer taking those jobs. So yes, it is really interesting to me that America overall is, we don't want these immigrants, but companies are saying, we need these immigrants, we need these jobs here. One of the problems that we saw in this country that sort of led to where we are today is that we stopped bringing those immigrants in, and then all those jobs moved across the border, moved overseas to different places. And now we're trying to get those jobs back. And that's why we have problems with baby formula, right? We only have one company that makes it. We don't really make any textiles in this company anymore. We don't really do serious farming in this country anymore. So we're susceptible to all of these things that happen out across the border. And then we have issues of salmonella that breaks out from whatever plant that came from Mexico, or a shortage of this, or a shortage of chips, because we decided a long time ago that we're not going to make things here anymore because it's above us or beneath us or whatever the concern may be. But in that same realm, we know we need immigrants because that's what makes this country so great.
How are Democrats trying to justify, if they are, the 20,000, or did you say 20? Yeah, you said 20,000 Ukrainian immigrants that are allowed into the country. How are they justifying differentiating between those immigrants and these at the border who are being, treated in such a different and inhumane way?
I'm going to tell you a very interesting bedtime story. Because first we were dealing with the Afghans and we said they helped us in war. We should do something to help them, but we can't give them anything else. We can't give them TPS. We can't do this. Then Ukraine broke out And then we did exactly for the Ukrainians what we said we couldn't do for the Afghan people that actually helped us during the battle, right? And at the same time, then we went full out and said, we're going to give them TPS, which is a temporary protective status, which allows them to be here and work and study for people who are here. But at the same time, we had Cameroonians who had many atrocities in their home country and had been asking for TPS for 2 years. And so the government said, we'll give it to the Cameroonians, but we're going to forget about Ethiopia. So the concern now is that they're trying to balance this out a little bit by picking one from each group at each time to say, okay, we'll pick someone who's brown or black and try to help them to match sort of this thing that we're doing overall. But there is nothing that you can do to resolve yourself with the picture that you have Mexican, Haitians, and other people from around the world at the southern border. And you said you can't process them. But in a month, you process 20 Ukrainians who literally walk past these people on the way in the border and then get in the country and say, yeah, we just walked past them. There's no explanation for that. We know what it is. It's a preference. It's white, blonde people get preference over black and brown people. And that enforcement is not carried out by our Department of Justice. I'm surprised that the Civil Rights Division hasn't made an issue of this because it is a preference given based on nationality or skin color that should not be allowed.
Clark on this. I mean, you're thinking like, where's Merrick Garland on this? Where is the outrage by the Justice Department that these black and brown immigrants are being treated inferior compared to how these white, Nordic-looking Ukrainians. Wow, such an interesting topic. I'm out of time, Allen, but thank you so much for your expertise on this and your insights. I guess this is under the Democratic administration, so as much as we'd like to think that the Democrats do a better job, I guess you would say that's not the case, at least.
They're still white Democrats, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Then they send our poor vice president to the border and make her the heavy on this. Okay. Wow.
And blame her for something she has nothing to do. She has more responsibility as the vice president than any vice president in immigration ever in the history of the world. The New York Post today has a story saying she's done nothing on immigration. And I'm thinking to myself, she doesn't have the purview to do anything on immigration.
Well, I said they sent her to the border to be the heavy on policies that are being implemented by Congress that she doesn't control, because we know at the end of the day, the White House has very little power over immigration, even trying to, amend this Title 42, and the court said no to that. So it just shows how limited executive power is on these immigration issues. But again, thank you so much, Allen, for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Fascinating.